It is 7:33 a.m. The Persian Gulf, 94 nautical miles southeast of Bushehr, in water that runs 62 meters deep and carries the particular acoustic complexity of a shallow, warm, high salinity sea that has been militarized along its northeastern coastline with a patience and a persistence that reflects 4 decades of Iranian strategic thinking about what it means to contest American naval power in a body of water where the geography itself is a weapon. The Gulf here is not wide. The Iranian coastline is visible on a clear day from the deck of any ship operating in the central shipping lane. The distance between the coast and the navigable channel is measured not in hundreds of miles, but in tens, and the sense of operating under observation, of being watched by a coastline that has been equipped over decades with radars and missile batteries and fast attack craft and the institutional will to use them, is not paranoia. It is an accurate reading of the operational environment. The sky is clear. Visibility unlimited. Wind from the north at 8 knots. Sea state barely 1. The Gulf in the early morning hours of a calm autumn day, flat enough that the thermal mirage along the horizon makes distant contacts shimmer and distort before the radar resolves them cleanly. The sun is low and southeast, climbing toward midday. Everything that happens in the next 2 hours and 17 minutes will happen in brilliant, unambiguous, full-spectrum visibility. There will be no darkness to hide in. There will be no weather to exploit. There will be only the tactical picture, and the tactical picture this morning is going to be considerably more informative to one side than to the other. USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN 72, is transiting southeast through the central Persian Gulf on a heading of 140, speed 18 knots, having entered the Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz 14 hours ago. She is operating with a reduced escort configuration for this portion of the transit. USS Lake Champlain, CG-57, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser that accompanied her through Hormuz, has detached for a replenishment rendezvous to the south, leaving the carrier with 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in her immediate screen. USS Nitze, DDG-94, 14 nautical miles ahead on the 140 bearing, and USS Bulkley, DDG-84, 11 nautical miles behind on the 320 bearing. The strike group is spread across the Gulf in the geometry that a carrier transit of this confined body of water requires, enough separation to provide mutual support and defensive depth, close enough that the Aegis networks of all 3 ships are in continuous data link communication through Link 16, building a composite tactical picture that any one ship could reconstruct from first principles if it needed to. The carrier is conducting flight operations. 2 FA-18Fs are on the catapults. The flight deck is running its controlled, organized rhythm, the choreography of an embarked air wing, conducting real work in a confined sea, while the ship beneath them continues her transit. The Combat Information Center is fully manned. The AN/SPY-1DV is in full active mode, painting the Gulf in every direction at a range that covers the Iranian coastline clearly. Every contact on the surface and in the airspace within 200 nautical miles is in track. The watch team in the CIC has been monitoring this contact for the last 47 minutes. The contact is bearing 037, range 61 nautical miles, on a course of 185, speed 22 knots. The radar cross-section, the speed, and the track behavior are consistent with a specific vessel class that the classified threat library identifies with high confidence as a Moudge-class frigate. the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy's domestically designed and domestically constructed light frigate, the centerpiece of Iranian naval public relations for the better part of a decade. The ship that Iranian admirals display before state television cameras and describe as the harbinger of a new era in Iranian naval capability. The classification confidence is 0.91. The contact has been closing on the carrier's track since 6:46 a.m. It is not on a collision course. It is on an intercept course, a subtle but operationally meaningful distinction that the track geometry makes clear to anyone who understands the difference between a ship navigating the Gulf and a ship deliberately positioning itself to shadow a carrier strike group. The Moudge-class frigate is a vessel that deserves careful and honest technical assessment because the gap between its public presentation and its operational reality is substantial and strategically significant. Iranian state media has, over the years, described the Moudge as Iran's answer to American naval power in the Gulf, a domestically produced warship that demonstrates the Islamic Republic's capacity to build competitive military hardware despite 4 decades of comprehensive international sanctions. The Moudge displaces approximately 1,400 to 1,500 tons, carries a 76mm naval gun derived from the Italian OTO Melara design that Iran possessed before the 1979 revolution, is fitted with surface-to-air missiles of the Mehrab type, a weapon that American intelligence has assessed as a modified version of the old Chinese HQ-7 short-range air defense system, and carries anti-ship missiles that Iranian defense officials have described variously as the Noor and the Qadr. It can make approximately 30 knots in calm water. It has a helicopter landing pad, but, based on observed operations, limited helicopter operating capability. Here is what the Moudge is not. It is not integrated. Its fire control systems, the gun director, the SAM fire control, the anti-ship missile targeting, are not connected through a common combat management system that processes inputs from multiple sensors simultaneously and allocates engagement resources automatically. They are individual systems, each capable of performing its specific function, but requiring crew action to pass information between them and lacking the kind of real-time sensor fusion that defines what a modern combat management system actually does. There is no Iranian equivalent of Aegis. There is no Iranian equivalent of Link 16. The Moudge's crew is professional, trained, and operating equipment that their nation built for them under conditions that would have broken a less determined defense industrial base. And what they built is, by the operational standards of 2025, a capable coastal defense vessel and a tactically limited adversary for an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in an open water engagement. At 7:33 a.m., the Moudge contact altered course 12 degrees to the east, a maneuver that placed it on a track converging with USS Abraham Lincoln's projected path at a point approximately 34 nautical miles ahead of the carrier's current position. The adjustment was deliberate. It was also detected and analyzed within one radar scan cycle by the AN/SPY-1DV aboard the carrier. The track algorithm updated the projected CPA 4.1 nautical miles in approximately 94 minutes at current speeds. Not a collision threat. A close approach. An intentional close approach designed to produce the proximity that generates footage that allows the IRGCN crew to report that their frigate operated within visual range of an American carrier, that creates the narrative of Iranian naval capability, operating freely in waters adjacent to the American fleet. The strike group commander, a rear admiral, embarked aboard Lincoln, having come aboard at Bahrain 4 days ago for this transit, was in the CIC at 7:33 a.m. He had been there since 7 o'clock, which was when the morning intelligence brief had flagged elevated IRGCN surface activity in the northern Gulf, consistent with deliberate positioning of assets ahead of the carrier's transit route. He looked at the updated Moudge track. He looked at the projected CPA. He looked at the time. Tau, get me Nitze on voice. And I want the Seahawk airborne in 15 minutes. The MH-60R Seahawk launched from Lincoln's flight deck at 7:48 a.m., climbing rapidly to 800 feet and turning northeast toward the Moudge's bearing. Its FLIR sensor slewed toward the contact within 2 minutes of achieving operational altitude. At 42 nautical miles, in calm air and brilliant morning light, the FLIR resolved the Iranian frigate clearly. A gray-hulled vessel, approximately 90 meters in length, with the distinctive profile of the Moudge-class, the single funnel amidships, the 76mm gun mount forward, the missile launchers visible on the afterdeck. The sensor operator noted 2 additional contacts in the Moudge's vicinity, a pair of small, fast craft, approximately 15 meters in length, running 3 nautical miles ahead of the frigate on a scouting line. IRGCN, fast attack craft, consistent with the standard IRGCN surface action group configuration of 1 frigate with fast boat escort. 3 contacts in total. The Moudge plus 2 fast craft. The fast craft altered their course at 7:51 a.m., the moment the Seahawk's presence was detected on their own radar, and began a maneuver that placed them on a track converging with the carrier's course from a bearing 30 degrees north of the Moudge's approach. A 3-contact geometry, the frigate approaching from 037, the fast craft now repositioning to 007. A pincer approach, scaled down from the 5-contact version the IRGCN had attempted in the Strait of Hormuz, but reflecting the same doctrinal logic. Approach from multiple bearings simultaneously, complicate the defensive picture, force the American ship to monitor multiple threats at multiple ranges. USS Nitze had been informed of the contact picture at 7:36 a.m. and had been in battle stations configuration since 7:42. Her commanding officer, a surface warfare officer with 21 years of service, who had conducted 4 previous Persian Gulf deployments, and whose briefing file on IRGCN harassment tactics was, at last count, 340 pages thick, maneuvered Nitze at 7:54 a.m. to place herself directly between the Moudge's projected track and Lincoln's position. The interposition maneuver, placing an escort between a potential threat and the primary asset, is one of the oldest and most operationally sound defensive tactics in surface warfare. Nitze's new position placed her 9 nautical miles ahead of Lincoln on a bearing of 032, directly in the approach corridor the Moudge would need to transit to achieve its projected CPA. With the carrier, the Moudge's crew saw Nitze's maneuver. They saw it on their own radar, and they saw its tactical meaning immediately. The destroyer had interposed herself. The approach corridor to the carrier now had an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in it, a warship that outmassed the Moudge by more than 6,000 tons. outgunned it across every relevant weapons category, and was operating with a sensor and combat management integration that the Moudge's crew could observe in the precision and speed of the interposition maneuver. The Moudge maintained its course and speed. Its crew was committed to the operation. They were not going to be deterred by a single destroyer maneuvering in their path without being told they should be deterred. That instruction was coming. At 8:03 a.m., USS Nitze transmitted on Channel 16 in English and Farsi. The message was standard format, legally precise, professionally delivered. An unidentified Iranian naval vessel was on a course that would bring it into close proximity with U.S. naval vessels conducting lawful operations in international waters. It was directed to identify itself, state its intentions, and alter course to maintain a minimum distance of 1,000 yards from all U.S. Navy vessels. Failure to comply would be considered an unsafe and unprofessional act under CUES, the code for unplanned encounters at sea, and would be responded to in accordance with standing rules of engagement for self-defense. The message was transmitted twice. The second transmission added one item the first had not included. Nitze identified herself by name and hull number DDG-94 and stated that she was the vessel issuing the warning. Giving your name to the IRGCN in the Persian Gulf is not a statement of vulnerability. It is a statement of confidence. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer that identifies herself by name to an approaching IRGCN frigate is communicating in the most direct possible terms that she has no concern about the Iranian vessel, knowing exactly which ship is blocking the approach. The name is on the hull in large white letters. The AIS transponder broadcasts it continuously. There is no tactical advantage in anonymity here, and there is a specific psychological advantage in clarity. We know who you are, you know who we are, and the next decision is yours. The Moudge responded at 8:06 a.m. The transmission, in Farsi, identified the vessel as an IRGCN naval unit conducting routine patrol operations in the Islamic Republic's declared maritime zone. It disputed the American characterization of the waters as international. It did not acknowledge the instruction to alter course. It maintained its heading. Its speed increased from 22 knots to 27 knots. At 8:08 a.m., the Seahawk repositioned from its holding orbit at 800 feet to a direct interposition course that placed the helicopter between the Moudge and Nitze at an altitude of 300 feet. The MH-60R's FLIR had been painting the Moudge's bridge continuously since 7:50 a.m., recording every detail of the Iranian vessel's behavior in high-resolution thermal imagery. At 300 feet and 9 nautical miles from the Moudge, the Seahawk was close enough that the Iranian crew could see it clearly from the bridge. Its presence communicated the same message the Seahawk always communicates in these situations. We are recording everything. Every maneuver, every emission, every course change. Everything you do from this moment forward is documented in a format that will be reviewed, analyzed, and archived by people with more time and better tools than you have. The Seahawk also activated its AN/APS-153 surface search radar in active mode, a deliberate choice since the radar's emission was detectable by the Moudge's electronic warfare systems, and its activation at close range communicated that the helicopter was not merely observing, but was in targeting geometry. The MH-60R's weapons capability against surface targets. It can carry Hellfire missiles and is certified for surface warfare employment in the Naval variant configuration, was not a secret to the IRGCN's crew. A Seahawk at 300 feet and 9 miles with active radar in targeting mode is a specific communication in the language of Persian Gulf confrontations, and the Moudge's crew read it correctly. At 8:14 a.m., Nitze activated her Mark 45 5-inch gun mount, not to fire, to train. The mount slewed from its stowed centerline position to a bearing of 037 directly toward the Moudge and elevated to a firing angle consistent with engagement of a surface target at 18 nautical miles, which was the Moudge's current range. The hydraulic training of a 5-inch naval gun mount in the direction of an approaching vessel is visible, audible, and unambiguous. It is not an act of aggression. It is a capability display, the physical expression of a fire control solution that has been built and is ready to execute on authorization. The Moudge's crew could see it through binoculars from the bridge. They could hear it on their passive acoustic systems. They knew what it meant. Simultaneously, Nitze's AN/SPY 1D radar shifted from standard search mode to a specific power level and emission pattern associated with fire control preparation. The mode that American EW specialists describe as ready to lock, detectable by any competent electronic warfare receiver within 40 nautical miles. The Moudge's EW system registered the emission change within 8 seconds. The watch officer reported it to the Moudge's commanding officer. The commanding officer looked at his tactical display. A Seahawk at 300 feet between his ship and the destroyer. The destroyer's gun mount trained in his direction. The destroyer's radar in fire control preparation mode. And behind all of this, still 26 nautical miles to the southeast, the carrier continuing her transit without altering a single navigational parameter in response to his approach. He reduced speed at 8:17 a.m. from 27 knots to 21, then to 17. The course held for another 4 minutes, maintaining the heading while bleeding speed, a face-saving maneuver that preserved the operational appearance of intentional patrol while eliminating the kinetic energy of an aggressive approach. At 8:21 AEM, he altered course 18 degrees to the north, a modest deviation, not a dramatic reversal, but a deviation that the Aegis track algorithm immediately registered as a CPA increase. The projected closest point of approach updated from 4.1 nautical miles to 7.8 nautical miles, then to 9.2 as the new course developed. The Moudge was no longer closing on the carrier's track. It was maintaining a parallel position at increasing range. The two fast craft, which had been on their converging northerly bearing throughout the Moudge's approach, read their frigate's maneuver and altered their own courses within 3 minutes. By 8:26 a.m., both fast craft were on outbound headings, opening from Nitze's position at 35 knots in the direction of the Iranian coastline. The three-contact approach had dissolved, the frigate holding at distance, the fast craft withdrawing, the approach corridor to the carrier empty. At 8:31 a.m., the strike group commander authorized USS Nitze to resume her station ahead of the carrier. The Seahawk maintained its orbit for another 22 minutes, recording the Moudge's behavior as the Iranian frigate settled into a parallel shadowing track at approximately 11 nautical miles from Lincoln's course line, present visible, maintaining the appearance of patrol while making no further effort to close on the carrier. The Moudge followed the strike group for 41 more minutes before turning north toward Bushehr and ending her involvement in the morning's events. She had never come closer than 11 nautical miles to USS Abraham Lincoln. The intelligence package the Seahawk brought back was comprehensive. The Moudge's full emission profile during an aggressive approach evolution, fire control, radar activation sequence, communication traffic with Shore Command Authority, electronic warfare receiver activity, navigation radar parameters, the fast craft's maneuvering patterns and their coordination timing relative to the Moudge's approach, the specific behavioral thresholds at which the IRGCN crew moderated their approach. The Seahawk repositioning produced a speed reduction. The gun mount training and radar mode change produced the course alteration. These behavioral thresholds were operationally valuable data. They told the analysts at Fifth Fleet exactly how far the IRGCN was willing to push the geometry before the physical demonstrations of American defensive capability became persuasive enough to produce a change in Iranian behavior. The Moudge-class frigate is Iran's proudest surface combatant. It is the vessel that Iranian state media displays most prominently in coverage of IRGCN operations, the ship that Iranian naval officials cite when arguing that the Islamic Republic's naval capabilities are developing in ways that American planners should take seriously. This argument is not entirely without merit. The Moudge represents a genuine indigenous achievement, and the investment in domestic warship construction under sanctions conditions reflects a sustained institutional commitment that deserves analytical respect. What the argument does not account for is the engagement reality demonstrated this morning. The Moudge approached a carrier strike group in the Persian Gulf at 22 knots and achieved a closest approach of 11 nautical miles, not because the IRGCN crew lacked the will to close further, but because a single Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, one Seahawk helicopter, and a gun mount trained at the correct bearing produced a decision calculus that the Moudge's commanding officer evaluated and resolved in favor of distance rather than confrontation. The Moudge was not chased away. It was shown, clearly and precisely, what closing further would cost, and it chose not to pay. That choice reflects accurate threat assessment. It does not reflect Iranian naval capability operating anywhere near the level its state media describes. USS Abraham Lincoln completed her Persian Gulf transit and commenced flight operations in her assigned operating area at 11:14 a.m., exactly as scheduled. The 2 hours and 17 minutes of IRGCN contact, the Moudge's approach, the fast craft's repositioning, Nitze's interposition, the Seahawk's forward presence, the gun mount training, the radar mode change had not altered the carrier's course, her speed, or her operational schedule by a single second. Iran sent its most capable frigate to shadow an American carrier in the Persian Gulf. The carrier continued her transit. The frigate watched from 11 miles and then went home. The Persian Gulf is not an Iranian lake. It has not been, and it will not be, regardless of how many Moudge-class frigates the IRGCN operates, or how frequently they are deployed to shadow American carriers that are going to complete their transits with or without Iranian permission. Bye for now.